What is going on, everybody? Julio here. And in today's lesson, you're going to learn how to build a responsive portfolio website using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So stay tuned for the project overview coming up next. So as you can already tell, the theme for this website is going to be a portfolio for a photographer, but you can make this into anything you want, such as a portfolio for a developer. All you have to do is just change the information. So scrolling down, you can see that we have a really nice effect here with the navigation. And then as we keep moving down to the works section, we have a really nice slider here with some 3D images. Then we have the services section, followed by an about section. Then here a blog post section. And towards the bottom, we have some additional contact information and then the footer. So this website is going to be fully responsive. Here we open up the responsive view, and you can see that it adapts as we make the viewport smaller. Then finally, we have the mobile navigation with smooth scrolling support as well. Something I wanted to point out is that there's also a premium SaaS version of this template that you can grab by just being a member over at buymeacoffee.com. So if that's something you're interested in, feel free to check it out. Also, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for more videos like this one, and like the video if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions. Now, without any further ado, let's jump right in. So as usual, for those of you that want to follow along with me, make sure that you grab the starter files from the link in the description below. So that's basically going to include everything you see right here, and it's just going to speed up the process as opposed to having to copy everything line by line. So what you're going to get is going to be this file right here. You're going to get all the images as well as the CSS and JavaScript. So here, the styles.css, it already has all the base styles that you will need. This is just going to speed up the process later on. And then same thing here for the JavaScript. It's currently empty, but we are going to populate this script once we get to this portion. So feel free to pause the video, grab those files, and once you're ready, let's begin. So let me just minimize this and make this larger. And now we can have the project side by side and we can see the changes as they're happening. I also have the completed project here just so that we can use it as a reference from time to time. Let me just minimize the sidebar by using Control B. And then the first thing that we are going to do now is start with the header. One more thing, I'm also here, as you can see, including all the components that we are going to be using for this project. So that's going to be remix icons, swiper.js for the carousel that you see here. And then we are going to be using scroll reveal for the on-scroll animations. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and begin with the header. So we are going to have the header element. It will have a class of header. And then inside of the header, we are going to have the navigation and all of its related items. So that's going to be the logo, this contact me link, as well as the hamburger menu, and then all the navigation links. So what we can do in here is use the nav element. We are going to be using a class of navbar, and then we are going to apply a secondary class of nav container, I should say. And this container class is going to be a component that we are going to be reusing over and over just for the consistency of the page itself so that everything just lines up properly. Something I also want to mention is that I originally built this using Sass, so I'm going to be using the Ben methodology. And I know it's a lot to type in when it comes to these classes because they're really long, but at the same time, Ben works really well when it comes to Sass. So for the logo, what we are going to do is use the anchor tag, and we are going to apply a class of navbar logo. Then we can point this back to the index.html. Then we can go ahead and add in the image, and this image is going to have a class of navbar logo image. And for the source, we can just go inside of the assets folder, images, and now we can just grab the logo. So I'm not going to focus a lot when it comes to accessibility. So for the time being, I'm just going to leave this alt tag empty. Now underneath, let me actually go back to the main project here. So underneath of this anchor tag for the logo, I'm going to have a div that is going to wrap all the navigation items you see right here. And for this, we are going to be using a div, as I mentioned, and we are going to apply the class of navbar menu. And then in here, we can just grab the UL and apply a class of navbar list. So the basic structure here is going to be composed of a list item and list link. So for the list item, we are going to be doing the same thing. So navbar list item. And then for the anchor tag, we can do navbar list link, like so. Then we can use here the relevant section so that when we click, for example, on the navigation links, it will scroll back down to this section. So for the first section, I'm going to be giving this an ID of home. So that's why I'm using hash home here. And since we already have the basic structure here, what we can do is just grab this, duplicate it down below as many times as we need. So for the second one, if we come back here, we need portfolio, services, about me, and blog. So let's go ahead and do that. Do portfolio. Here we can do services, about me, and then finally we can do blog. So now we have to change out the IDs as well. So for this one, we can say portfolio, services. Then here we can just say about me. And finally, we can say blog, like so. So far, that's going to be the main structure here for the list. So the last thing that we have to add in is going to be the buttons that we have here. And by the way, I didn't go through the trouble of actually changing this to an X just because I was using an SVG and I didn't want to keep just switching back and forth, although I could have used icons. But for the specific design that I used as a reference, they used a hamburger menu that was just like this one. So I just grabbed the SVG straight from the design. So if anything, you can just click it again and it's going to disappear. As you can see, the navigation is fixed anyways. Or when you click a link, it's just going to close it automatically. So we're going to be using JavaScript for that. But as I mentioned, now we are going to add in the contact link as well as the hamburger menu that we have right there. So for this, what we are going to be doing is scrolling down underneath of this navbar menu. And here, what we are going to do is add another div. And in fact, I'm not even going to add a space. So here, I'm just going to call this navbar. And I will say btn group, like so. And then here, I'm going to use the anchor tag. And this anchor tag is going to have a class of btn. It will have a class of btn text, which is going to be a modifier. And then another class, which is going to be btn transparent. And just because we are going to have several different components as far as buttons, so that's why we have all these classes. Now here, what I'm going to do is say contact me, like so. And if somebody was to click on this link, we can just use mail to for the href, and that's going to open up the mail client that you have on your computer. So to do so, all we have to do is say mail to column, and then we can say the email. So for this example, I'll just say someone at and then here domain.com. So again, you specify mail to, followed by a column, and then you specify the email. Just like that. And underneath of here, this is where I'm going to add the hamburger menu itself. And the reason that I didn't use an icon, again, was because I wanted to use this exact SVG. Mostly because the remix icon doesn't really have one that looks just like that. Else I would have just used it. So for that, we are going to be using the button element, and it's going to be a type of button, like so. And we are also going to apply a class here for styling, which is going to be btn. Then we can do btn text, as well as, again, we are going to be doing the btn. Well, actually, this is not going to be text. So the class that I do want to add is going to be btn action, like so. And inside of the button here element, what we are going to do is now use the SVG. So I'm going to grab that and just paste it in. Now you don't have to copy it. I'm going to include the SVG code so that you can just grab it and paste it in yourself. And that's going to be pretty much it for the structure here of the navigation. So the next step is going to be working within the CSS file so that we can make it look a lot better. So let's go ahead and do that right now. All right, so now that we are inside of the style.css, let's quickly go over what we have here. So first, I start by importing the fonts that we are going to be using for this project. And then I have all the variables or custom properties that we are going to be using. I didn't really want to get too deep into this, so I'm only going to be using custom properties for the colors as well as the font families here. But if you want, you can create custom properties for things such as padding, margins, and just like font sizes and even spacing in general. But like I said, I wanted to keep this basic. Then as far as the base styles, here I apply a basic reset by resetting the margins, paddings, and setting the box sizing to border box. It just makes the math a lot simpler when you're sizing your elements. Same here with the font size of 62.5%. So this basically just means 10 pixels. And the reasoning is because we are going to be using rem units and they just scale a lot better. Then the scroll behavior here of smooth. I'm going to comment this out for now, and this is just going to give us the smooth scrolling effect when we scroll to each individual section. So let me just demo that real quick, like you see right there. And here again, just some basic styles, and same thing down here as well. And then we also have some styles here that are going to modify the appearance of the scroll bar. So the first comment here is going to be for the components. So the first component that we are going to be adding to the list is going to be the container. So the container is going to have, and well, this is going to have a max width as well, but for the time being, since we are on smaller screens, I'm only going to add a margin inline. And margin inline just means left and right. And we are going to make this auto just so that we can center this container in the middle of the screen later on once we have enough room and we actually add a width. So same deal here with the padding. So padding inline. And the padding that I want to add on the left and right is going to be 1.8 rem. So that's going to be equal to 18 pixels. Since the root is going to be 10 pixels, 1.8, well, 1 is going to mean 10, and then 0.8 means 8. So you combine them together, you get 18 pixels. Again, we are going to revisit the components later on, especially when we add in the buttons. But for the time being, let's go ahead and work on the header. So as far as the header, what we want to do here is add a position, which is going to be fixed. And then we also want to add a C index with a really high value just so that we can make sure that it stays on top of the content of the page. Then here we can just, since we made it fixed, it's going to lose its default block width of 100%. So we can just go ahead and add that in right there. Then I'm going to add a padding top of 3 rem. Then I'm going to do the same thing, but it's going to be on the bottom and it's going to be 1 rem. So we're going to do PP. And emit is just going to speed up the process of typing these things out, like so. And then I'm going to use a background color here, and the background color is going to be the custom property of body BG color. Then what I want to add here is a transition that is going to be on the padding itself. And it's going to be over 0.25 seconds, like so. And the reason for that is because right here, we have a larger padding on the top. So once we start scrolling, see how it gets smaller, and then we also get this border here on the bottom. So to get this result, what we do is target the header once more, but this time we target it when it also has a class of active that we are going to apply through JavaScript. And then what we do is just add the following styles. So the large padding top is now going to be the same as the padding bottom. So we will do padding top equal to 1 rem. And we also want to add a box shadow here, and the box shadow is going to be 0 for the X, then 1 pixel here, and then we can do 0 as well, followed by an RGBA of white, which is going to be 255, 255, 255, and then for the alpha, we can just do 0.1, just so that we can make it really light. So what we can do now is go ahead inside of the JavaScript file, and we can add the JavaScript that is going to give us this effect right here. So the first thing that we are going to do is create a function. This function is going to have a name of scroll, header scroll, I should say. And then we can just make it an arrow function here. And then we are going to define a constant variable that we are going to call the header element. And then we can just grab this element by using a class name. So we can say document.querySelector. And then we just pass in the name of the element, or the class, I should say, or it could be an ID or even the tag. But in this case, we are going to be using the class name. And since we want to grab the header, that's what we are going to do. So now we can just use the this keyword to basically refer to this particular element. And we want to grab the scroll Y position, and then we want to do a condition. So we want to check whether it's been scrolled past a certain point. In this situation, I'm going to be using the ternary operator, just so that we don't have to deal with if statements, since this is actually pretty short. So the way it works is that you first have the condition. So I'll say if it's greater or equal to 30. Then what I want to do is, if it's true, we want to add the class of active to the header element. So for that, we say class list add. And since we are already specifying that it's a class, we don't really have to add a dot. We can just say active. And then we use a column. And if it's false, then we target the header element. And again, we just remove the class, like so. So now if we go ahead and test that out, it's not going to work. And the reason for that is because we still have to call this function. So we want to select the window object here so that we can apply an event listener scroll to it. So window, add event listener here. Again, we want to listen for a scroll event. And then we just pass in here the function header scroll, like so. So technically we don't have any content to scroll to. So let's quickly just go up to the body just so that we can create a little bit of height. Let's just say 1000 BH right there. And well, that's not going to work. So instead, I'm going to go down here. And what I'll do is just add a div, and we're going to call it demo. So this demo, I'm just going to place it right here because we are going to be getting rid of it shortly. I just want to show you how it's going to look like. And here we can just do a height of 1000 of the VH, like so. So now that we can scroll, as you can see, the moment I scroll past 30, the padding on the top goes away. We get the transition, and then we also get the box shadow on the bottom. And if we go back to the top, then it just goes away. So this number can also be changed. So you could make it 500, and then you can just trigger that effect like so. But again, for me personally, 30 just works best, like you see right there. So that's how we get this scroll effect here on the header. So now we can just get rid of this. And then we can get rid of it from here as well. So now going back to the header comment, we can continue now by styling the nav bar itself. So let's select the nav bar. The nav bar is going to have a display of flex, and we want to align the items to the center and then justify the content space between so that we can create some separation here, just like so. Then underneath, what I want to do is target the nav bar logo, like so. And then I want to give this a margin right, which is going to be 2.5 rem. Should be rem, not ren. And this is just so that if we were to get really small, we still have a space here in between. The next thing that I want to do is actually I'm going to duplicate this down below. And now I can just edit it out and add image to it, like so. And we can delete this, and I'm going to specify a min width. So this is going to make it that this image, even if it gets like squished down, it's not going to get any smaller than the min width that I specify, which is going to be 102 rem, 102 pixels. So that's going to be 10 rem, 10.2 rem, I should say, like so. And the next thing that I want to do is target the navbar menu. So let's go quickly underneath navbar menu. And the following styles that I want to apply here is going to be a background color. For this, we can just use the var, and then it's going to be the body. Well, not actually body, but the dark color. Then what I want to do, let me actually just with the positioning here to the top. The position is going to be absolute, and since the navbar parent, which is the header here, already has the position fixed, there's really no need to make this fixed as well because it's going to scroll with the parent also. So I want to make sure that this is always positioned 0 to the top and then 0 to the left. As far as the width, I'm going to make this 25 rem, and then the height is going to be 100 of the VH, just like so. Now to hide this, what I want to do is add a transform translate. Obviously, we still want to see what we are doing. So after I add the following styles, I'm also going to comment them out until we need them. So to hide this navigation, I'm going to use transform, translate, and I'm just going to make it 26 rep, just to make sure that it's always out of view. As I mentioned, I'm going to comment this out because we still want to see what we are going to do here. Then what I want to do is add here a C index. Again, just a high value so that we can always have it on top of all the content. Then I want to add a transition. This transition is going to be on the transform over 0.5 seconds. And that's everything that we need for the time being. So let's go ahead and basically tell the navigation what is going to happen once we click the hamburger menu. So the nav bar here, well, first let's specify that it's the menu. So when the nav bar menu has the class of active, what we are going to do is say that we want the transform translate x to be back to 0. So then we click this item here, the hamburger menu, it's going to show it again. And we can actually take care of that right now. So let me just uncomment this out. And now we can go ahead and jump back inside of the JavaScript file. And what we are going to do here first is just basically tell it that when we click on the hamburger menu, we want to show the menu. So to do that, let's create some global variables. So this one is going to be menu toggler. Again, we will use document query selector so that we can select our elements. And the one that we want to grab this time around is going to be the ID of menu toggler. And that reminds me, I forgot to add this ID to the hamburger menu. So let's go back to the index.html. And here we can add an ID of menu toggler, just like so. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and we can go underneath, and now we can just modify this. And we can grab the navbar menu. And then we can just modify the name. Like so. So just like before, we are going to create a function here. So we are going to call this toggle menu. And this is going to be an arrow function as well. And here, what we want to do is say that the navbar menu is going to have the class list toggled between active, basically on and off. So to do so, what we have to do is say navbar menu class list, and it's going to be the same as before, except that we will use toggle, which means basically turn on and off when you click it. And then we just pass in the class name, which is going to be active. The last step is going to be calling the function. So we are going to attach an event listener to the menu toggler. And the event that we want to listen for is going to be click. And then we just pass in the toggle menu function that we created before. So technically, if I did everything correctly, I'm pretty sure I did, when I click this, it should work like so. So we click it, it comes out, and when I click it again, it just hides. So the next part here is going to be basically closing the menu as well when we click a particular link. So how we can do this is by creating another event listener. And this one is going to be attached to the window object itself. So to do so, what we can do is create another function. And this one, I'm going to call it links toggle menu. Probably not the best name, but it is what it is. And this is going to be another arrow function. And the only difference here is that we are going to say E, and then we can just use an if statement here. And we'll say E. In this case, E refers to whatever element is going to be clicked on. And then we want to do something with that element, whether it's check for a certain thing. So I'm going to say that E target. So if this particular element that I'm targeting contains a class, so we say class list dot contains, we want to do something. So the class list that I want to check for is going to be navbar list link. So if the target contains that particular class, then I want to remove the menu from view. So here we can just say navbar menu class list remove, and then again active. So again, since we don't really have anything else to evaluate here, we don't even have to use the curly braces. So we can just straight do the result that we want to happen. So if we go ahead and open this up, so as you can see, I'm clicking everywhere, nothing happens, and that's because nothing here is going to match this class. And also, well, nothing was going to happen even if I did click it because I still haven't called the function. So what I want to do here is target the window object, add an event listener, and the event listener here is going to be click, and then I want to call the function. So now the result is still going to be the same. I'm clicking everywhere since it doesn't match that particular class. Nothing will happen, but the moment it does match a class of navbar list link, it's going to close the navigation, which is exactly what we want. So that takes care of everything related to the header. The next step that we are going to, at least within the JavaScript, focus on is going to be swiper and then scroll reveal, but that's not going to happen until later on. So in the meantime, let's go back inside of the CSS file so that we can continue working on this header here. So again, let me just comment this out so that we can have it in view all the time. And we are going to be able to style this a lot better when we can actually see it. So underneath here, what I want to do next is target my navbar list. This will be a display of flex. And now I want to change the flex direction back to a column. Then what I want to do is add a border bottom to every list item. So navbar list item, border bottom, and then this is going to be 1 pixel solid, and then I'll use an RGBA, which is again going to be white. So we are going to do 255, and then again 255, 255, and then we will do 0.1, like so. And I think I'm going to target the last one as well, just so that we can get rid of this border. So border, bottom, none. But let's make sure that we want to target the last one. So we can say last of type, like so. Then what I want to do is target the list link. And here I'm going to give this a display of block, since by default they are inline. Color, this is going to be the variable of light color. Then what I want to do is add a padding all around, which is going to be 1 rem. followed by a transition, which is going to be on the opacity. This is going to be for the hover effect, and it's going to be over 0.25 seconds. Then we can target the navbar list link once more. And here we can use is, and this is going to allow us to basically do multiple things as far as like a hover effect, focus, active, and so on, as opposed to having to retype everything. So for example, here I can just say is hover as well as focus, like so. And then I can add whatever it is I want to happen. So the opacity here is going to be turned down to 0.5. And if we go ahead and try that out, you see that it works. So this is going to be exactly the same as doing this. So hover. So this is basically the same thing, except that you do it all at once and it saves you a lot of time. So the next thing that I want to do now is target the navbar BTN group. So navbar BTN group. And now I can do a display of flex. And then I want to add a column gap of 1.5 rem for separation. And well, now that we have the styles that we want here, we can just go ahead and turn this back on. And then the other thing that we are going to add in now is going to be the button component. So let's scroll all the way back to the top right here. And we can target the BTN. And this BTN is going to have a display of inline block. Then I'm going to add a cursor of pointer just so that when we hover over it, it now is clickable. Then another thing that I want to do here as well is transition the opacity over 0.25 seconds just to keep everything consistent. And then we can do the same thing with the is hover and focus. So BTN is hover focus. And then here we can just do an opacity, which is going to be 0.8, like so. The next thing that I want to target is going to be the modifiers. So BTN action. And this action button in particular is going to have a font size of 1.8 rem, and then a color, which is going to be the light color. Then, as far as the line height, I will do 0. And what else? So we had BTN text and BTN transparent. So here we can just go ahead and add that in as well. So BTN text. So here for the font family, we can do the variable of title font, then a letter spacing, which is going to be 1 pixel. The font size is going to be 2 rem, and then I'm going to give it some padding top and bottom of 1 rem and 3 rem left and right, like so. Now I'm going to target the BTN transparent, and here the color is going to be the variable of light color 2. Then I'm going to add a border bottom, and that's going to be 2 pixels, solid, and then we're going to use bar, and we are going to use light color 2 as well. And then finally, I'm going to get rid of the padding for this particular button because we don't really need it. And just like so, it takes care of all of our buttons that have those classes in particular. And we're pretty much done with the header and the navigation. So the next thing that we are going to do, well, first of all, what I'm going to do is scroll all the way back down. So here we have the main element, showcase, and portfolio, and the rest of them. So that's what we're going to keep working on. So since the main is going to be very simple, what we are going to do here is just select the main element. And I'm going to apply an overflow X of hidden. And you're not going to see this in play right now, but you will later on when we add the on-scroll animations. So that's going to eliminate the horizontal scroll bars when certain elements are animating in from the sides. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this particular portion. The next step is going to be the markup for the showcase. So first, let's go ahead and add in the main element. And then let me just move this all the way down to the bottom, but still before the footer. So now we can go ahead and we can add in the showcase, which is going to be the next section that we are going to be working on. And the showcase is going to be pretty straightforward. So here I'm going to add in the section element. And this section element is going to have the class of showcase. And remember, we are going to also apply an ID because we wanted to work with the navigation. So inside of here, we are going to be using a div, and this div is going to have the class of showcase container, as well as the container component. Then we are going to have an h1 that has the class of showcase title. And then we also want to add a title class and then a title main modifier. And then in here, I'm going to just paste in the text that I have. And don't worry, I'm going to, well, it's not a big deal. I was going to say that I was going to include the text, but you can just pause the video and copy it in. Since for the most part, aside from this, we are going to be using some dummy text like lorem ipsum. So underneath of here, what I want to do now is use the picture element. Picture. And I also want to apply a class to this. So the class that I want to apply to this is going to be showcase image, like so. So the first thing that I want to do is specify a source, which is going to be for switching the images after a certain breakpoint. So in a sense, it's going to be changing the image based on the width of the screen that you're on. For example, I want to show a smaller image by default on small screens, and then once we move over to tablets or larger, we can show a higher resolution image. I'm not really going to get into a lot of details when it comes to this, but like I said, this is just going to switch images between different breakpoints. So by default here, the image that we are going to be using is going to be inside of the assets folder, images folder, and then this one is going to be the showcase image SM. And now the image here is showing up. So before this default image, we want to add in a source. So the source is going to have a media here, and then this is where we specify the breakpoint in particular. Since this is mobile first, I'm going to specify a min width that is going to be the same 768 pixels that I'm going to be using for my media queries as far as tablets and up. Then what we have to do, because we can't really specify a source like we do here, we have to specify a source set. So src set. And now we can just go ahead and copy this, paste it in here, and then we can go ahead and change this one to LG because this one is going to be the larger image. So now if we go ahead and try that out, once we get to that particular breakpoint, notice how now the higher resolution image is being loaded in. So that's exactly what we want. And as far as the showcase, that's pretty much all there is to it. So back inside of the styles.css, what we are going to do here is not much at all. So first of all, let me just take a look at so yeah, I have everything in place. So the first thing that I'm going to do is going to be targeting the titles. So this title here in particular is going to be a component. Same thing with the modifier. So back in here, what we are going to do is scroll all the way to the top, find the components, and here underneath, we are going to target the title. And as far as the title, what I want to do here is add a font family. This font family is going to be the title font. Then I want to add a color. And this color is going to be the light color 3. Letter spacing is going to be 1 pixel. And then the font size for the titles is going to be 3.6 rem. Now remember, we have a modifier. So title main, this is going to be slightly different because this is going to target specifically our main title. So for this, we are going to use clamp for responsive typography. So here I want to specify that the minimum size is going to be 4.2 rem. And then we can use a font size here that is going to be based off the viewport width. So for this, I'm going to use 8BH. And then for the maximum, we can specify 10 rem. So now if we go ahead and try that out, you'll notice that it's going to resize based on the width. And then it's going to cap out basically at the 10 rem that we have here, and then the minimum here is going to be 4.2. Then as far as the line height, I'm going to switch it to 1.2 just to bring the text here closer. And then what I want to do is actually clip this text so that we can see the same image here as the text background. So to do that, the first thing that we do is set the background to an image. So for this, we will use the URL, and then we are going to go inside of the assets folder. What is my file structure? So here within, so that means that I have to go outside, which is what I was doing. So I don't know why it's not coming up. Oh, now it is. So here I want to grab the showcase image LG, center, and then I want to move it by 37%. Actually 37 right there. And then I'll just use no repeat. Then for the background size, we are going to use cover. Then we can use the background clip and set it to clip the text. Now we also have to use the WebKit here background clip prefix. So WebKit background clip, and then it's going to be basically be the same thing as text. And now we can say color is going to be set to transparent. And now we can see the image here. Now I'm going to add a position of relative. And then I'm going to set it to be a C index of 10, just because I want it to be on top of this image right here. And yeah, as far as the title components, that's going to be pretty much it. So let's go scroll back down to the showcase comment here, and let's go ahead and add some padding to the top here so that we can create some spacing. And we'll say showcase. The padding top is going to be 7.4 rem. Then for the padding bottom, we can do 12 rem. And then we can go ahead and select the portfolio metadata. Actually, this is not, I'm not in the portfolio. So what I should be here for the showcase instead, it should be a padding top, not a bottom. So I was looking at my reference and I looked at the wrong CSS. So this one is going to be 14.5 for the padding top. Then for the showcase container, we want to align the text to the center, like so. And now we are going to target the showcase image. And we are going to make this a display of inline block, just so that we are able to center it with this text align. And now I want to move it up. So I'm going to use transform translate Y. And then I'm going to use a negative number, which is going to be -3 rem. And now the image is placed exactly where I want it to be. And that's going to be pretty much it for this section. Then we are going to move to the portfolio section so that we can work on the HTML for it. So for the portfolio section, there's really not all that much to it, since all of the heavy lifting is going to be done by Swiper.js. So basically, we're going to use a few of our own classes, and then everything else is just going to be coming from Swiper.js. So to start, we will use the section element here, and we are going to apply the class of portfolio. And then we want to apply an ID of portfolio as well. Then in here, we will have a div that has the class of portfolio container. And then we're going to reuse the container component as well. We're going to have something new here, and this is going to be for the titles. So this div is going to have a class of portfolio metadata. And I'm also going to apply the component class of section metadata, like so. And should be portfolio, like so. And let's get rid of the O as well. So the section metadata is mostly just going to hold information such as the title you see right here, including this title with text. So in here, I'm going to use an h2, and this h2 is going to have the class of title. That's the only class that we are going to be applying here. And then here we can say my works. And that's pretty much it for that. Now we are going to apply the Swiper.js classes. So for this, we want a container. And this container is going to be a div that has the class of Swiper. The Swiper class is coming from Swiper.js. And then it's going to have an additional class of my Swiper. Now keep in mind that this secondary class it can be anything. This is just in case that you have several swipers, then you can have a secondary class that you can use later on to select and then initiate the Swiper JS within JavaScript. Again, I took this straight from the Swiper JS documentation. I didn't really bother to change anything aside from the content inside of the slides. So like I said, you can keep it as it is, or you can change it if you wanted to. Then in here, we are going to have another one. And this div is going to have the class of Swiper wrapper. And since this is coming straight from Swiper.js, I'm not really going to bother. And when it comes to adding BEM classes here. Then we are going to have the Swiper slide itself. So here, this is going to be a div. And this one is going to have the class of Swiper slide. And then we simply just have an image. This image is going to actually be from Unsplash. So we are going to be using Unsplash here to generate a random image. Keep in mind that the only reason why I did it this way was because this is just for demo purposes, and I didn't feel like it was important to find a bunch of images and download them and include them in a folder. So it's just easier to do this when it comes to testing. If you actually planned on using this, obviously you would be using your own images. So now that we have the slide, we can just duplicate it down below as many times as we want. So in the original demo, I had 9. So here I have 3, 6, and 9. And now all the images are going to be the same for the most part. So to make sure that we get some different images, we can just go ahead, for example, here, and just add a different width and height, which is going to be slightly more than the other. And this is going to give us different images each time. Again, it's not really important, but if you wanted to have different images for your demo, this is how you would do it. Like so. And that's all that we need for the portfolio section. Now we need to make this functional. But before that, let's actually go back inside of the styles for the portfolio section, because we still have to do a few things here with Swiper as well. And the first thing that I'm going to do is target the portfolio itself. And here I'm going to add a padding top, which is going to be 7.4 rem. And this is what I was looking at before when I mistakenly added the wrong padding to the showcase. Then for the padding bottom, what I'm going to do is add 12 rem, like so. Now I'm going to select the portfolio metadata. And this is going to have a padding bottom, and it's going to be 4 rem. Then I'm going to text the line to the left, because by default, the component is going to have a text align of center. And speaking of the metadata component, let's take care of that right now. So let's scroll all the way back to the top. And under here, what we are going to do now is select the section metadata. And these are going to be the general styles for the metadata itself. So here, padding bottom, and this padding bottom is going to be 6 rem, like so. And then the text align center, which is why we overrode it before with text align of left. Now we don't have this yet, but I'm going to go ahead and add it in now because we are going to need it for the next section. So this is going to be section metadata description, like so. And this is just going to receive a margin dot, which is going to be 1.3 rem. Again, we still haven't added this class to any element, but we will in the next section. So I might as well just take care of it now as opposed to doing it later. So now what we are going to do is modify some of the styles for Swiper JS. So to do this, all we have to do is select Swiper. And well, we don't need to select Swiper because by default, it's going to be a block element. So instead, I'm going to select the Swiper slide. And this is going to get a width of 30 rem. It's going to get a height, which is going to be 30 rem as well. And now what I'm going to do is select the Swiper slide image. And now the width here is going to be 100%. The height is going to be 100% as well. And now we can go ahead and use object fit, which is going to be of cover. And here, one more thing that I have to add that I forgot to add for the for Swiper is the pagination. So we are going to find the last closing div for the swiper slide. Then we're going to find the swiper wrapper, and underneath of the swiper wrapper, but still within the swiper div, what we want to do here is add another div, and this div is going to have the class of swiper pagination, like so. And right now we can't see it, but it's going to show up once we initialize it. So let's quickly go back inside of the JavaScript file, and here underneath of the swiper comment, what we are going to do is initiate it. So we are going to create a new instance of it, and this we can just call swiper. And then we can say new swiper. And then here we are going to have some options. So first, the first thing that we want to do is select the swiper that you want to apply this effect to. In this case, it was the class of swiper, my swiper, for the secondary class here. Like I said, you could call this anything. And now we are going to have all the options for this particular swiper. And the first thing that we want to add is the effect. So the effect that we want to use here is going to be cover flow. Again, you can get all this information from the Swiper.js website, the documentation. Grab cursor. Is going to be set to true. Then the centered slides. Centered slides. This is going to be equal to true as well. Now slides per view, this is you can use this to control how many you want to show at the same time. You can specify like 1, 2, 3, and so on. But in this case, I'm just going to let it decide. So I'm going to set it to auto. Now for the cover flow effect itself, we want to select cover flow effect. And in here, so this is going to be another object. And the first value is going to be, well, first we'll use the rotate. And then the value is going to be 50. Then the stretch will be 0. The depth is going to be 100. The modifier is going to be 1. And then the slide shadows, this is going to be set to true. Now we're still not done yet because we still have to add the pagination. So as far as the pagination, what we want to do here is set this to the element, which is going to be our element that we have here with the class of swiper pagination. And this has to be in quotation marks. And let's make sure we specify it's a class. And let's also make sure that we don't specify that it's a div, because that's not exactly what we want. And as you can see now, it shows up right here, the pagination. So one of the other things that we are going to do is override the default Swiper.js color for the pagination. And as you can see, the swiper is already working. And since we have the default right here, well, we'll get to that later once we move on to the styles for larger screens. And cover flow effect. That's just the what do you call it? That's coming from the I can't remember. The IntelliSense. So anyways, back inside of here, what we are going to do now is select the swiper pagination. And then what we want to do is basically just change the background color. The background color that I want to use here is going to be variable and light color 2. And let me make sure I have to specify that it's the bullet, not the pagination itself. So bullet, like so. And now we get the white bullet right there. So that's everything that we need for the portfolio section. Then we can just move on to the services. So before we move on, again, going back to this, so this should work automatically because it's set to auto. And I just realized that the reason why it didn't do it automatically is because this should be slides per view. And as you can see, after fixing that, we get the effect that we want. So now we can go ahead and move over to the, as I mentioned, the services section. So in here, what we want to do is, just like the rest of them, we want to start with a section that has the class of services and ID of services. And I believe that's what I called it here. So yes, services. So section, class of services, as well as an ID of services. Then we want the services container class. Well, I guess I could just do it like this, and then the other one over here, like so. And then we want to continue with the metadata. So we want to use the div that has a class of services metadata. And then we want to reuse the section metadata, like so. And inside of there, we're going to have an h2 that has the class of title. And it will say services that I provide, like so. Now this one is going to have the description that I mentioned. So services, actually section metadata description. And then for this, we can just use some dummy text. In fact, I'm just going to copy what I already have. And let me just bring this over like so. And that's going to be it for the metadata that we need there. What we need next is going to be this image wrapper, and then all the content for the services. So here, underneath of this services metadata div, what we want to do is add another div. And this div is going to have the class of services image wrapper. Services image wrapper. And then in here, we are going to have an image. So this image is going to be inside of the assets folder, images, and then Chris Paul. Now we want another container, and this container is going to hold all the services as I mentioned. So here we want a div that has the class of services list. And then we want to have an article. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to have a div. And this div is going to be the wrapper for two of them. Because if we go here and we make this bigger, notice that for this layout right here, where are the services? Right here. So you see that we have them grouped together so that we can get this layout with CSS Grid later on. So to achieve that layout, we actually have to group them separately. And I'm going to call this particular div services list divider, like so. And inside of this divider, I'm going to have two of the services, which I'm going to wrap around the article element, and I'm going to apply the class of services list item, like so. Inside of this services list item, I'm going to have an icon. This icon is going to have the class of RI, camera, and then line. And it will also have a class of services list icon, like so. And this particular class is just so that we can target it later on. Then in H3, that has the class of services list title, and then the component that has the class of title. And here we can say photography. Let me capitalize the P. And then we are going to have a description as well. So for this description, we are going to use a P tag, and we're going to call it services list description, like so. And once more, I'm going to copy the text, which is going to be lorem. And this is actually prettier. That's doing this for some reason. So I'm going to bring everything to its own line, like so. And then what we are going to do is add the rest of the articles. So right here. So let me just copy this, paste it down below. And what we can do is go ahead, and this thing just keeps scrolling back to the top. So what we are going to do now here is just change the text. So this one is going to be videography, like so. And what I'm going to do is change this icon to video. Actually, it's VD on and then 2. And that's going to give us the camera there. Now for the last article, this article we want to place outside of the services list divider. And this one is going to, well, initially I was looking for a drone icon, but I really couldn't find one because Remix Icons doesn't really have one. So the next best thing is going to be a plane. So here I'm going to specify flight, takeoff, line, like so. And that's going to give us the plane. And then we can just change this to aerial photography, like so. And it looks like that's pretty much it for the services section. Let me just double check. And it is. So now let's go ahead and make this look better. So back inside of the styles.css, the first thing that I'm going to do is apply a different background color to this section. So the services is going to get a background color, which is going to be the var dark color. Then I'm going to add a padding top and bottom, which is going to be the same. So I'm going to specify that it's a padding block, 7.4 rem. And then I'm going to select the services container, and I'm going to make this a grid container. So display grid, like so. Then I'm going to select the images, the services image wrapper, and I'm going to add some separation here. So services image wrapper. I'm going to create some separation by adding a margin bottom that is going to be 6 rem, like so. And now I'm going to target the image itself that is inside of it. So in fact, let me just grab this. And then I can target the image inside of it. And what I'm going to do is add a margin inline, margin inline. Where are you? Right there. and make it auto so that later on when we are on the other screen sizes, the image is going to default to the center. Well, later on, we actually push it all the way to the left. But for now, we always want to keep it in the center when it cannot fill the entire space. Now I'm going to select the services list as well as the services list divider. And these are styles that they both have in common. So that's going to be a display of grid, and it's also going to have a gap of 5 rem. So that's starting to look a lot better already. So now I'm going to select the services list icon. And I'm going to make this a display of inline block. Then for the font size, I'm going to make it 3.6 rem. And then I'm going to add a line height of 3 rem, like so. Now, as far as the color itself, I'm going to use a light color, which is going to be 3. And let me just double check with the title. So the title actually already has. Oh, but the thing is that I didn't apply the, oh, I did. So technically, we don't need this because it's already getting it from the secondary class of title. And after the line height, I'm going to apply a margin bottom of 3 rem just to create some additional separation. And we're almost done with this section. The last thing that we have to do is select the title itself. So services title. And I'm going to add a margin bottom here of 1 rem. Like so. And that already looks pretty good, similar to the finished project. And yeah, I believe we're pretty much done with this section. So the next one is going to be the about section, then the blog, and finally the footer, and we're almost done. Then the last part is going to be the media queries, and then adding the scroll reveal animations. So back inside of the index.html, let's go ahead and work on the about section. So luckily for the about section, the markup is not really a lot. So it's something that we are going to get done pretty quickly. So just like the rest of them, we are going to start with a section element that has a class of about as well as the ID of about. And this should be about me actually. Then we are going to have a div that has the class of about container and a secondary class of container. Then we are going to have a div that is going to wrap all the about information, which is going to be all this text that you see right here about Chris Paul in the description, as well as this button. So this div is going to have a class of about information. Then what I want to do is add an h2, and this h2 is going to have a class of about information title, as well as the reusable component that is the class of title. And here we can say about Chris Paul. Then underneath, we are going to have a p tag that has the class of about information description. And then we can just use some dummy text here, just like I did before. I'm going to grab the text that I already have, and I'm going to just paste it in. And since we have two different paragraphs here, I'm just going to duplicate it down below. And finally, underneath, we are going to add an anchor tag. And this anchor tag is going to have a class of btn text, as well as btn green. Although it might not look like it, it actually has like a slight shade. This is a shade of a green, although it looks kind of blue. But anyways, that's not really relevant. I'm going to save this so that Prettier can format it for me. And then for the text itself, this is going to read, learn more. Finally, we want to add in the two images that later we are going to position on top of one another by using CSS grid. So that's going to happen outside of this about information div. So we are going to have our own wrapper, which I'm going to be calling about images. And then here we can just have both images together. So the first image is going to have a class of about images image. And it's also going to have a secondary class of about images image top, which is going to be a modifier. And this is what a lot of people don't like about them. It's just the long classes like these ones. Then we can just paste this down below and change this one to bottom. So now we can go inside of the assets folder, images folder, and what we can do here is just select the about image top. Then we'll do the same thing for the other one. And this one is going to be bottom, like so. So now we have both images, and this is everything that we need for the about section. Now let's go ahead and go back inside of the styles.css so that we can make it look more like this. So to start, we are going to grab the about section, and we are going to apply a padding top, which is going to be 12 rem. Then we are going to apply a padding bottom, which is going to be 6 rem, like so. Then I'm going to select the about container. And this about container is going to have a display of grid. Then what I'm going to do is apply a gap, which is going to be 8 rem. The next thing that I want to target is going to be the title. So about information title right there. And then I want to apply a margin bottom, which is going to be 2 rem. Now I'm going to select the first of type for the about information description. Information description, first of type. And what I want to do here is add a margin bottom that is going to be 1.5 rem, like so. Now I want to copy this, paste it down below since we have another one, except that this one is going to be the last of type. And what we want to do is just increase the margin bottom here to 4 rem instead, like so. And that's going to give us some additional separation. And we also have another class here for the button, the buttons that we haven't used before, and that's going to be the btn green. So let's scroll all the way back up to the components. And let's target this. And what we want to do here is apply a background color. So this one in particular is going to be the bar. And then the color that we want is going to be the light color 2. And then we want to also make the actual color to be the dark color, like so. And I believe that's pretty much it for all the buttons. I'm not exactly sure, so don't quote me on that, but I think I'm pretty sure. Well, that makes no sense. I think I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that's going to be it. But if anything, we're going to come back and revisit this anyways. So going back to the about section here, The next thing that I want to do is target my about images and make it a grid container. So about images, we want to make this a display of grid. And then we want to add some grid template columns. So we want to use the repeat function. And here we are going to specify we want to use 12. And then they're going to be one fraction each. And then the margin inline is going to be auto. And this is going to center the images in the middle later on once we actually position them. So the next thing that I want to show you is how we can actually position them this way that we have here. So for this, I'm going to make this slightly larger, and I'm going to open up the inspector just so that I can show you what's going on. And this is going, well, this is going to be the main grid that we have here. I want this grid right here. So to position them exactly where we want them, the first thing that I'm going to do is select them individually. So here we can say about images, image top, and let me copy this again, paste it down below. This one is going to be the bottom. What I want to do in here is now specify the starting and ending points. So this one, I wanted to start, at least when it comes to the grid column, we can specify that we wanted to start at 4 and then end all the way to the end. So start here at 4 and end at the end. And then as far as the grid row, here I'm just going to say start 1 and span 4. So now we have some more room when it comes to positioning the other image exactly where we want them. So this is going to be pretty similar. So I'm just going to copy this, paste it in here, and now we can just make some changes. So this one, I wanted to still start at 1, but I wanted to end at 7, which is going to be around here. Like so. As you can see. And I actually did it on the row. This should be on the column. So 1, 7, like so. So that's more like it. So for the grid row, what I want to do, I wanted to start over here at 3. And then once we get to 3, I'm going to span it towards the bottom by 5. Although it's not really going to make that much of a difference here, but it's no big deal. And then I wanted to always stay on top, which it already is by default, but it doesn't really hurt. So I'm going to add in a C index of 5, which is going to give it a higher value than this one. And that's going to pretty much be it for the alignment that we have there. So let me just close this and make it smaller again. As you can see, it looks exactly just like it. And that's going to be pretty much it for this section. The next section is going to be the blog. So this one right here. And we're going to be using the same technique there with the picture element to switch between the images at different viewport sizes. And then from there, we're going to be almost done. So the last thing after that is just the media queries and we're all set. But anyways, back to this. Let's go head back to the original here and let's go back inside of the index.html. And here there's quite a bit, but not a lot of markup. And here we're just going to start again with the section element. the class of blog, and the ID of blog. And then a div that has the class of blog, container, and then the class of container. We're going to be reusing the section metadata here as well. So we used it here, I believe. So let's grab it, and then we can just modify it. Paste it there. And here for the title, we can just go ahead and change this to latest blog post. Then we have to add the link that we have here. And since we already built all those components, it's going to be pretty simple. So btn, then the modifier class of btn text, and then btn transparent, like so. We can just use a hash there, and then view all posts, just like so, right there. There's a few things that we have to add, so as far as spacing, but we're going to take care of that within CSS later. So now we're going to have two different articles here, which is going to be pretty simple. It's going to be composed of an image, a title, and then another link. So outside of this, services metadata, and let's make sure that we change this to blog metadata. And then since we are going to be modifying this description in particular, let's also add a secondary class here, which is going to be blog metadata description. So that's going to be used in conjunction with the section metadata description. And from the looks of it, that's all the changes that we need to make. So underneath of there, what we are going to do next is have an article. And this article is going to have a class of blog post, and then a modifier, which is going to be blog. Actually, I'm not going to type it like that. I'll just do the post left. Like so. So as I mentioned, we're going to be using the same concept with the picture element. So the picture is going to have a class of blog post image. Then here we are going to specify the source, then media, and then in here what we are going to do is say again min width 768. Actually, at this point it doesn't really matter, we can just do 450, like so. And then we specify the source set. We go inside of the assets folder. Then inside of the images folder. And then we want to grab blog post 1, like so. And it's going to be the PNG. So for as far as the default image, let's use the image tag here, or element. Images folder, and then here we can say blog post 1 small. And now we get the image that we want. If we make it bigger, you'll notice how it's going to switch to a longer image. And now that we have the structure there, well, almost there, we still have to add the title as well as the link. So underneath of the picture element, we are going to use an H3 that has the class of blog post title, as well as the class of title. And then we'll just say sample title. Under here, we are going to use the anchor tag once more, so we can just actually copy this. and paste it here. And let's see. So we don't have to make any changes at all. And then for the text, we can just say read more. And now we can just copy this, paste it down below for the second article, change the modifier to right. And then all we have to do is just change the images here to 2. And now we get everything that we want. So here, let's go inside of the CSS file once more, and let's style up the blog. So let me just scroll up a little bit. And the first thing that we are going to do here is add some padding top and bottom. And the padding top is going to be 4 rem. Then the padding bottom is going to be 12 rem, like so. Now for the blog container, this is going to be a display of grid. Then for the blog metadata description, I want to add a margin bottom here for separation. That is going to be 4 rem. So let's take a look at that. Right there, as you can see, we get the spacing between the description and the button. Then I want to select the blog post that is the first of type, and then I want to add some separation by adding some margin there. So here, so blog post first of type, and then the margin bottom is going to be 3 rem. And that's going to give us some separation. And we see blog post. Oh, this should be 6, not 3. Right there. And for the image itself, because we still want to create some separation between the images and the title, so we can say blog post image. This one is going to get the margin bottom. That is going to be 3 rem. Like so. And same concept here, because if we make this slightly larger, well, this is already large enough so that it changes the images, but notice how it's more to the left here and then not to the right. So on smaller screens like these, what I want to do is just center this image in the middle. So for the blog post image, what I'll do is add margin left and right. So for this, I'll use margin inline and make it auto. So now if we scroll down, you see that we have equal spacing on the left and right. And now the last thing that I'm going to style here, and I just hate it that it keeps doing that, like sending me all the way back. But I guess it's not a big deal. So yeah, back to this. The last thing that I want to do here is style up the title a little bit. So now we can do blog post title. And for this, I'm going to set the font size to be 2.6 rem. And then the margin bottom is going to be 2 rem. I find it funny that sometimes I'll do the emit abbreviations and then often like I'll just type the whole thing, or at least type most of it and then just like select it. But there we have it. So we have a small size and a larger space. So what else are we going to do here? Well, actually, we don't really have anything else to do. So now we can move down to the footer, and the footer actually has quite a bit of styles, but it's not something that is like overwhelming since we're still reusing some of the things that we still have, which is, for example, this title right there. So we can go back to the index.html, and now we can just add these styles. Well, not the styles, but the markup for the footer itself. And here we're going to be using the footer element, class of footer, and then a div that has the class of footer, container, as well as container. Then I'm going to create separate groups. So the first one is going to be footer group. And this is going to have the title as well as the contact me button. Since we already did something similar here for the showcase, we can just, actually not the showcase. Well, it was the showcase, but it was like here with the H1. So let me just copy this. And what I'll do is paste it in here. And since we can only have one H1 throughout the page, let's go ahead and make that an H2 instead. And then here we have showcase title. Although I don't believe we actually use that class at all. I mean, you can get rid of it, but like I said, just following the band methodology, I just added in it anyways as I was laying out the markup, not realizing whether I would use it or not, because I ended up using the modifier instead. But here, I do believe that I used the one with the footer title. I'm not sure yet. We'll find out in a little bit. And then for the content itself, we can say looking for a professional photographer. And now for the anchor tag, we can just grab it from here and paste it in here. And this is still going to be the same. So text and BTN transparent. The only difference is that we're going to be using the same mail to within the href. So mail to, and then someone at domain.com. So that's already working right there. We still have to do some things when it comes to centering. But as far as the first group, that's ready. Then we are going to have a span that has a class of footer separator, like so. Technically, you could use an HR, but can't remember where I read it. I think it was a cheat sheet for semantic HTML where it said that you should stay away from trying to use a horizontal rule as a divider. So that's why I'm using a span here instead. And now this is going to be our other group. So let me just copy this. And it's going to close it for us automatically. And then inside of here, I'm going to have the logo. So since we already did this within the navigation, let's just grab it. And we can paste it here. And as opposed to navbar logo, instead, what I'll do here is change this to footer logo. And as far as the class for the image itself, we don't really need it here. So I'm going to get rid of it. Then underneath of this logo, I'm going to add a p tag, and this p tag is going to have a class of footer description. Footer description. And just like before, I'm going to add some dummy text here. And then we are going to add the list. And this list is going to be for the social media icons, and then finally the copyright notice. So this is going to be a UL. This UL is going to have the class of footer list. And then footer list item and footer list link. And inside of each individual footer list link, we want to have an icon. So the icon that I'm going to be using is going to be the class of array, Twitter, and line. So now that we have the basic structure, we can just copy this down below 3 more times. And we can just go ahead and change the icons. So this one is going to be dribble. And the last one is going to be GitHub. Well, actually, this person technically wouldn't have a GitHub since they're a photographer, but you know, it's just a demo. It doesn't really matter what type of icons you use. But as you can see, all the icons are now showing up. The last thing that I want to add here is going to be the copyright notice, and that's going to be underneath of the UL. So this is going to be a span as well that has the class of footer copyright. And then to generate the copyright symbol, we just use ampersand copy, and then we can say Chris Paul 2022 all rights reserved. And that's all there is for the markup. We are almost there. So the last thing that we're going to do now is style the footer, and then we can finally move to the media queries. And then finally, we add the animations on scroll. So let's go ahead and make it look more like this. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is target the footer. The footer is going to have a background color. This background color is going to be the dark color. The padding top is going to be 10 rem. And then the padding bottom is going to be 3 rem. Now I'm going to select the footer group. And I'm going to text the line to the center. Like so. So that's looking much better already. The next thing that I'm going to do is select the footer title. And this will receive a margin bottom of 3 rem. And then we are going to style the separator. So footer separator. Let's make sure that I added the extra underscore. No, I did not. So now what we can go ahead and do is make this a display of block, because by default, it's going to be an inline element. And what we can do next is add a height of 1 pixel and then a background color, which is going to be the light color. Then I want to create some additional separation, so I'm going to use a margin top of 10 rem, as you can see there. And I also want to add it to the bottom. So margin bottom is going to be 8 rem instead, like so. Then I'm going to select the footer logo. Footer logo. And I'm going to make this a display of inline block. And now it's going to center itself like so, because of the text align of center that I already have there. So the next thing now is going to be the description. And this will just have a margin block of 3 rem to add margin top and bottom. Margin block, 3 rem. Now I'm going to select the footer list. This will have a display of flex, a gap of 2 rem for separation. And then I want to justify my content to the center, like so. Now I'm going to select the footer list link and add some styles so that we can make it look more like the ones we have right here. So footer list link. First, let's begin by adding a color. This color is going to be the light color 2. And I'm going to make the font size here 1.8 rem. Going to give this a border, 1 pixel, solid, RGBA, which is going to be white with a 0.1 opacity or transparency alpha, whatever you want to call it. Then I'm going to give this a width, and it's going to be 4 rem. Height is going to be 4 rem as well. Let me actually move this down. And then we can do a border radius of 50% to make it round. We still have to center it. And to do that, well, first, let's make it a display of flex. And now we can do align items center and justify content center, like so. Then we'll add a transition here for the animation, which is going to be on the background color over 0.25 seconds. And then we can say footer, list link, hover. Here we can just change the background color to the light color too. And then for the color of the text, we can make this the dark color. So if we go ahead and test that out, you can see that it works just fine, just like in the demo here. So now we just have to format this copyright notice. So let's do that right now. Footer, copyright. And then all we have to do is just make this a display of inline block, and then give it a margin top of 5 rem. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is for the mobile layout. So the only thing that we have to do now is go ahead and make this, well, actually, well, that's because this one has a letter spacing here. So let me just check that out real quick. So this has a letter spacing of 1 pixel. Let me see now. This one here. Oh, so that's because when I added in the letter spacing of 1 pixel, I didn't notice, but my mistake, I said left instead. So let's go ahead and fix that right now. BTN text right here. This should be letter spacing of 1 pixel. And it should be 1 pixel, not 1 XP. So that's more like it right there. But yeah, as I mentioned, now it's time for us to work on the media queries. So this is the fun part, making the website responsive. So the first breakpoint here is going to be for smaller phones, and this is just going to give a width to the container after a certain point. So I'm going to be using rem units for this, m units for this example, because m units are relative to the font of the browser in this case. So even if the user was to change their default font size within the browser, this is going to be more ideal because it's going to be based on that. And so here, the m units are based off the default of 16 pixels. So 31.25 EM is going to be, let me see, do the math real quick. So it's going to be about 500 pixels. So 48 is going to be 768, and 64 is going to be 1024. Yeah, 1024. So yeah, so the only thing on the smaller one, what I want to do here is just target the container, and I'm going to give it a width, and this width is going to be a max width of 33 M. actually rem. And well, I guess it doesn't really matter. It's actually too small here. So instead, I'm going to be making it 50, 500. So now if we go ahead and stretch this out a little bit, notice how it stays fixed now at 500. Kind of like this one. So the next breakpoint is going to be for the tablets. As I mentioned, we're not going to do anything else here. I'm now going to target the body, and the body is going to have a font size now of 16 rem. The container is going to change its width as well. So max width here is going to be 768. So we are going to do 76.8 rem, like so. So if we made that bigger, you should now see it. Then the next thing that I want to do is target the menu toggler, and I want to hide it. Display none. Then I want to target the navbar menu, and I want to reset all the properties. So the position is going to be set to initial, the width to initial. Then the height here is going to be initial as well. The background color is going to be set to initial, or we can just do transparent. And here the transform is going to be initial as well. And then finally the transition, none. Let me just scroll down a little bit more so that we have more room. So now the thing that we have to do is change the flex direction of the nav list. So navbar list, flex direction, back to row. And then the gap is going to be 1 rem. Let's get rid of this. So that looks better already. Then what I'm going to do is select the list item for the navbar. And I'm going to get rid of the border bottom, setting it to none, like so. Then I want to move up the image a little bit more. So I'm going to do a transform translate Y, transform translate Y of -5 rem, like so. Now I want to style the section metadata because since we made this a display grid, and since we are going to be changing some things later on when it comes to the layout, I want to make sure that the section metadata is going to start here and then stretch all the way across. So for this, what I'm going to do is specify, since it's already living within a grid container, I'm going to say section metadata start at the grid column 1, and then, well, basically stretch all the way across. Now I'm going to select the section metadata description, and I'm going to give this a max width of 70 rem. Then what I want to do here is give it a margin inline of auto. So that's just going to center the content, like so. So for example, like if I get rid of it, you're not going to see like much of a change, but that's because of the text that we have before. Unless I made this even larger. And right there, is it not 70 rem? So section metadata description, let me see. Yeah, it's already 700. Well, here we have a margin at the top and then 0. So margin inline. Why is it not moving? Oh, so it is. It's just like barely it's like very subtle, but you can see it kicking in there. Thought it wasn't working there for a second. Anyways, now we are going to select the services container. And we are going to make this a grid, have a grid template columns that it's repeated twice at 1 FR each. I want to align my items to the center. And I want to apply a column gap that is going to be 2.5 rem, like so. Then I'm going to select the services image wrapper, and I'm going to get rid of the margin bottom that I gave it initially. Like so. Then I'm going to select the image itself that is within it that had the margin of auto for the inline. So it's margin inline. Like so. So now it's all the way at the end here. Well, it's going to always be, even if I make it bigger. Now I'm going to target the services list. Services list. And the services list is going to be a grid. Well, it's already a grid, but it will have a grid template columns that it's also repeated 2 times at 1 fraction each. And then the services list item, I will say align self center, like so. Now I'm going to select together the about container and the blog container, since they are going to be exactly the same. And I'm going to apply grid template columns. Again, it's going to be repeated twice, 1 fraction each. And then I want to align my items to the center. And well, actually what I already did this before, so just for the sake. So here, gap 2.5 rem, like so. So since I already did this over here for the services container, let me just grab it from here. And then I can just include it here as well, like so. So with that out of the way, the next thing for this breakpoint is going to be selecting the blog post here, because we still have some margin bottom, and that's what's looking messed up here. So we are going to say blog post first of type, Let me just scroll down a little bit more. So first of type, margin bottom is going to be 0. So that's going to fix it. Then for the footer description, we want to do the same thing we did here and make this 70 rem. Actually, not 70 rem, but 50 instead. Make it smaller for the description. We're going to set the max width here to be 50 rem. So since this is a lot smaller than this one, it's going to be a lot easier to see as far as the margin inline. And we're going to set this to auto just to center this container in the middle right there. So that's going to take care for the tablet view. I mean, this still works, so it looks good. And the next step is going to be the next breakpoint, which is going to be for laptops and desktops. So this is going to be actually pretty basic, and there's really not much to do after this, aside from adding the animations, and then we are done. So again, here we're just going to select the container, and we are going to increase the max width to 75 rem. Actually, not 75 rem. So I did this originally in ems. So 75, I think it's like 1200. So 120 rem, like so. Then we are going to select the modifier for the title main. And then since we are going to be on larger screens, we have to move up the image a little bit so that it looks more like this. So here we are going to say background position. We are still at center for the X axis, and then on the Y, we can do 48%. And that's going to get it to the position that I want. Then I'm going to select the showcase image because we have to move it up a little bit more. So showcase image, transform, translate, Y, -8 rem. Just like so. And finally, we are going to target the services container. And right here, what we want to do is actually make the first one 1 fraction and the other one 1.5. So grid template columns 1 fr, and then we can do 1.5 fr. Just like so. That's already looking beautiful. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the website itself and the responsiveness. As I mentioned, the last thing that we have to do is just add the animations. So as you can see, it looks pretty good. And if I go the responsive view right here, grab the handles, and you can see that everything is just going to adjust automatically. And this still works. We scroll to the services portfolio. Oh, and that's because remember we commented out the smooth scroll behavior. So let's uncomment that out again. And now here, when we, for example, go all the way to the blog, notice how it just scrolls automatically all the way to the bottom, I should say, not to the down. So yeah, that's working. So as I mentioned, now the last thing that we have to do is add in the on-scroll animations. So let's go back inside of the JavaScript file for this. And the first thing that we have to do is initialize scroll reveal. So for this, I'm going to define a constant variable, SR for scroll reveal. You can call it whatever. And then here we say scroll reveal. And then this is going to be an object with certain options, basically global options. And yeah, so what I want to do here is just have some default options. So here for the distance, I'm going to set this to be 50 pixels. Then the next one is going to be the duration. And the duration is going to be 1500 milliseconds. And the last one is going to be the easing. And the easing is going to be a cubic Bezier. So here, I'm just going to grab it from my reference and paste it in. You can take a moment and just copy it, pause the video if you want. Shouldn't really take long. And now we can move on with the rest of the actual animations. So here we just have to reference the scroll reveal that we have here. And we can say SR and then reveal. And then we just simply pass in the class of the element or elements that we want to animate. In this case, the showcase title, showcase image, section metadata, and the swiper are going to have the same origin animation. So I'm going to group them all together. So first, we are going to start with the showcase title, then the showcase image, then the section metadata, and as you can see, it's already working. And finally, swiper. So now we separate this with a comma, and then we just pass in options if we want to. So in this case, I'm going to change the origin so that it animates from the top. And the next thing that I want to add is an interval. And the interval here is going to be 250. And I messed up somewhere, so let me just double check. Origin, so right here, let me just make this bigger. So section metadata, where did I mess up? Oh, that's because this is an object, like so. So it has to go in here. Let me just format this really quickly. And now everything works just fine, as you can see. Animates in from the direction that I want. And so will the section metadata as well. So for the next one, I'm actually just going to copy this, paste it down below. Let's be a little bit lazy. And now we can just go ahead and just change what we want to animate. So in this case, services, image, wrapper, then about, information, and finally the post left. And those are the only things here that I'm going to animate. So let me just get rid of the last one. And then for the options here, I'm going to only use the origin, and this one is going to be the left. So now if we go ahead and scroll down, notice how it animates from the left and everything else that has the same animation. So I'm going to copy this one again, since it's a lot better than copying the first one. And now I can just go ahead and change this to services list, about, images, and post right, like so. So let me just double check. About images, post. Let me see, because I saw an animation there that it didn't really come from the right place, I should say. Oh, of course, this should be right. So there we go. You get left, right, left, right, left, right. So yeah, that's working beautifully. So the last one is going to be for the footer container itself. So let me just grab this portion. Let me just close this up. Let's also make sure that we specify the object here, and then the origin top. Actually, we could add the footer here as well, but this has an interval, so I mean, it doesn't really matter. So the origin is going to be the top here, and then this one is going to be selecting the footer container. And if we make this bigger now and we check it out on the big screen, if we reload, we get the nice fluid animation. Here the header's still working. So is wiper and everything else. Let's see. And beautiful. So we are finally done with this project. I hope you found it useful. If you did, make sure you subscribe. If you still haven't, thumbs up the video, leave a comment down below. I always appreciate it, whether it's a question or a compliment. Either one is going to work for me. So yeah, I hope you guys found this video useful. And if you did, again, subscribe, show me some love. I'll catch you guys in the next lesson.